able to join us today. So this won't be posted on the internet, but I will share it with folks who are unable to attend. So while we're in this space, please be respectful in our conversations and questions. We're really grateful that we have such great partners at the city through many departments, as well as in the mayor's team, as well as partners across the region who are participating with us. And we want to be respectful of their hard work and their efforts. And we have a lot of different opinions here in this space. In addition to that, I want to emphasize that we want to try to avoid jargon and acronyms. There's a lot in the transportation world, but we have a lot of folks for whom this is not their full-time gig. So please try to make the things that you share accessible, offering definitions or links in the chat that help explain what's going on. And then I want to encourage everyone to be mindful of time, even though I'm the one who's talking a lot right now. We're going to try and do more follow-up outside our CMC meeting so that we can get into more depth in some of the questions and conversations that come up here. And then I want to encourage folks to use the chat. Because we're recording, we will be saving that. It will be part of the record in the notes. And that is a way for us to make sure that we're capturing the things that you share. So I would like to do just a quick round of introductions from our city staff and elected officials who are here, and also my Vice Chair Taylor. So I'm going to hand it to Taylor, and then we will popcorn through our electeds. And while that's happening, if you are not one of those people, please put your name and if you're representing an organization in the chat so that we know you're here.
Thanks, Liz. I'm Taylor March. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in the Carondelet neighborhood, and I will pass it over to Scott.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Scott Ogilvie, City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency, Program Manager for Complete Streets. And we have another person attending from the office today, Tyler Wilson, who's a recent addition urban designer to the office.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tyler Wilson, new with the city, Planning and Urban Design Department, and I'm the new designer, so I'm happy to be here with everyone today.
And we can
Hello, this is Bobby Brantley, St. Louis, Missouri.
I don't see a ton of city staff, but I see Grace is on today.
Jamie Wilson's here from the street department.
Hi, Jamie.
Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself too?
So, and I'm, yes, I'm Andrew Lackey. I'm with the St. Louis City Office on the Disabled.
And did we get everyone? Danielle, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, and Saul is trying to actually get in. He says for some reason it's still loading. My name is Danielle Spradley. I'm the outreach director for Congresswoman Cori Bush, and our legislative policy transit specialist should be joining here in just a minute if he can get in.
Looks like Saul just got in.
Okay, great.
Hey everybody. Yeah, I just switched devices. I'm Saul Levin. I use he, him pronouns. I am a policy advisor for Congresswoman Bush on transportation and climate and labor and various other related things. Wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you. And thank you especially to Danielle and Saul for being here with us. Okay, great. Well, it's wonderful to see all of your faces and see your names. We're just going to have just a quick look at the minutes from last month. I sent them out in the email and I just dropped them in the chat. If there are any comments, concerns, questions, things we need to add or annotate, please let us know. I do want to note, Cheryl in our last meeting provided some information about the Hodemont tracks, and Lisa Potts wrote to me and expressed that there's a lot of excitement in the neighborhood for that. So I'm going to drop the link to the video again in the chat so people can check that out because it's a really exciting project. Any other comments or thoughts on the minutes from last month? Okay, great. I'm going to take that as a go. Excellent. So the next thing that we're going to do, we typically, and I think I did not drop the agenda in, so let me put that in. So the agenda is in the chat if you want to take a look at it. So what we've done in the past in our meetings is we have a time at the beginning of our meeting to invite open concerns, both from our membership and also from other folks who might be visiting. We're going to try a little bit of a different format going forward. So rather than having a dialogue about the concerns that are raised, we have a wonderful member, Dawn, who has volunteered to note take. And so Dawn is going to take extensive notes during our meeting, but we'll be documenting each issue. So we're asking folks who are sharing concerns to bring those up in a concise format, preferably less than 2 minutes, so that we can have time to hear a variety of different things that are coming to the front. And then rather than discussing that in this format, we're going to do follow-up individually with the appropriate city staff and departments and make sure that we get that back both to the individual and also to the full group. And whether that's appropriate to come back in our meeting notes or perhaps to bring as an agenda item in the future, we want to make sure that we have the space for everyone to think about and respond thoughtfully, and also that we can hear the wide range of different questions that are coming up. So I know that we have one concern on the table already, so I'd like to hand it to Jackie to share something she's been noticing.
Okay, thanks, Liz. People were probably excited to not hear from me anymore, but with the open forum, I just wanted to bring up a concern and try to see where we stand with tracking pedestrian facilities staying open during construction. I specifically noticed a lot of problems in downtown. Sidewalks are closed. Today, I was almost hit by a car traveling northbound on 18th Street that had to veer into the crosswalk to get around the construction that was in the middle of the intersection. So, you know, just thinking about downtown being one of our, you know, supposed to be one of our most walkable, transit-rich, dense neighborhoods. And it can be very challenging for people to navigate on foot. So I know we have our work zone mobility on the books. I know staffing shortages and COVID hiring freezes, but I thought maybe we could get an update from the city moving forward about that protocol.
Thanks, yeah, this is Jamie.
Yeah, sorry. Jamie, do you have a quick response to that?
Yeah, this is Jamie from the street department. Our inspectors watch all our active work zones. I caught 18th Street. I didn't hear what the cross street was to be able to check that one.
It's Olive. It's actually something that's in the travel lane, but cars traveling northbound have to go into the crosswalk. So it's actually when the pedestrian has the walk signal.
I think that's the water division. We'll have to check with them. So our
suspect was COVID concerns at the jail.
So
what was that? I'm sorry.
So Jamie, it's at Olive and 18th, and if we'll circle back around to you and check in on what you found out there. And I know downtown is also an important question for a variety of people in the city. So Jackie will definitely follow up and get some more info for you. Thank you for raising that. Okay. Are there any other concerns or questions or observations that folks want to bring up?
This is Bobby Brantley.
Yes, Bobby.
Yeah, this concerns bus stops. Now we're in the snow season, but many times the bus stops they're blocked by the snow. Many times they're blocked by tall grass, and many times they're blocked by standing water. And people in wheelchairs or people with disability have a hard time getting on the bus, and the bus stops like away from that in the middle of the street. But people that are in wheelchairs, sometimes it's very they can't get to the bus, and as a person that's using the bus a lot, and I'm walking, there's tall grass. I mean, you have to like stand on a corner away from the bus stop so the bus can see you. So one thing I want to address is bus stop safety.
Great. Thank you, Bobby, for bringing that up. That's really important to make sure that we have that access. And I think actually a good transition when we move to our next agenda topic too. Thank you. Just as a note in the discussion in the chat, for those of you on the phone, Kaylina wanted to know the best way to report work zone concerns, blocking pedestrian right of way. We're pretty sure that's CSB, and you can also share those concerns directly with the committee, and we'll make sure that gets to the streets department and to Jamie. Any
Liz, I had
other?
another.
Yeah, Sam.
Speaking of downtown, I was wondering what the process looks like to repaint bike lanes. As you all know, we had 2 new bike lanes implemented on 11th and Pine. And there's been a lot of construction. Our TrailNet office is on 11th Street at the corner of 11th and Pine. And so, as someone who goes into work from time to time, I notice these things. And I'm not sure if it was Spire or whoever, but they obviously dug up a lot of the road. And some of the bike lanes there are just, you can't even tell they're bike lanes anymore. When they repave the streets, a lot of the bike lanes no longer there. The pavement markings are super faded. I'm just not sure what the process is like to get those repainted, because in some areas they're just not even recognizable anymore. So, Jamie, I'm not sure if that's a streets thing or whoever's in charge of that. Just wanted to let everyone know about that.
Thanks, Sam. That's a really good question, and I'm also seeing some questions in the chat about coordinating street repaving and street maintenance. So I think this is a topic we're going to follow up with Jamie to hear more about, and we'll report back. That might be a good topic for a future meeting. Okay. Any final concerns, questions we want to bring up?
Hey, I'm Aubrey. This is my first meeting, so I apologize if this is something that's already been covered or discussed. But I'd love to know from the city representatives whether there's any movement on the bike pedestrian coordinator position. And there was a great article recently by Kia Wilson and Streets Blog about the kind of dire state of pedestrian safety in St. Louis. So I'd love to hear about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Aubrey. We'll definitely follow up and figure out what the status is on the position and get back to everybody about that. Okay, and we've also noted for questions about maintenance on the bus stops between the city and Metro. So we have some information on that. We'll follow up with more. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Again, if you ever have ongoing questions or concerns, you can always send those into the committee. And even if you're not able to attend a meeting, we are happy to share those here in the space. So I now would like to hand this over to Saul Levin, who introduced himself at the beginning. He's a policy advisor for Congresswoman Cori Bush. There he is. And I'd love him to give a little bit of an intro about the Congresswoman's interest in transportation and in transit in the city of St. Louis.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz. It's really great to see everyone on the call. And I'd love, for this to be, for some of us, a continuation of a conversation, but for others, the start of a conversation. So folks on the call, if you're working on transit, transportation, pedestrian safety, I work on those issues in the Congresswoman's DC office, and Danielle and I and a few others in the office work closely on these things. So just generally, feel welcome to reach out if you have concerns, and I hope we can work together on a lot of things. Congresswoman Bush is a huge advocate for transportation and transit funding from the federal government to cities and counties and local governments and transit agencies. And she's also been very focused on trying to identify what the gaps are, because she's been looking at what happens in St. Louis with unsafe sidewalks, infrequent, at times there's been, not enough bus drivers, there's been infrequent bus service in some places, there's been a handful of things. And, we know that there's a lot of folks who are working hard on this. And so one of the things she said and focused on is people don't have enough money for the types of transportation that working folks and lower income folks often rely on to be really reliable and high quality. And we've also talked about, when she used to ride the bus all the time, and that makes her a very rare member of Congress. And so one of the things that we've realized is that members of Congress don't really know or care as much about transit or walking a lot of times, because a lot of them have, spent their whole life with a driver or what have you, or, and aren't as interested in these things. And so just from a base level, the Congresswoman comes into this space with personal experience and a vested interest in transportation of many modes and many kinds working really well. just to give an overview of some of the specific things we've been working on, we have some really exciting legislation, hopefully coming up soon, which we've worked on with various folks. I think some folks on the call, but others, to try and create a new program to fund more bus rapid transit projects locally. And I think that, you know, basically the way that the system currently works at the federal level, bus rapid transit and light rail and many other systems are all competing for the same bucket of funding. And because of that, light rail usually wins out. And light rail is great, you know, it's a great thing, but it means that we don't really have real choices to be made with the current federal funding of which transit project can we do in which place, because there aren't really separate buckets where we can reliably think we could get federal funding. So we're really excited about that. We're really working a lot on the bipartisan infrastructure money implementation and trying to get it to the right things and make sure that they don't sort of not send enough money to the middle of the country where in many ways we need it the most in St. Louis and similar places. And sometimes we worry that they're going to try and send it all to New York. So we're working on that kind of thing in terms of implementation of money that's already been allocated. And then I also just wanted to mention the Congresswoman's ongoing efforts on the Green New Deal for cities, which, if folks aren't familiar, basically tried to say we had the coronavirus pandemic crisis and we sent money to local governments to take on projects to keep people safe. The climate crisis is ongoing and it's, you know, too hot out and it's, you know, there's hurricanes, tornadoes, all these different storms that are getting worse and worse. And the federal government isn't giving cities and local governments enough money to have programs for people to use renewable energy, for people to have enough funding for different air quality monitoring projects, for people to have money for transit and pedestrian projects so people actually have options of how to get around, and so on. And so we're continuing to push to try and see if we can get funding there, because she's like, I want to bring a Green New Deal to St. Louis. I want to bring more bus service and more bus funding for operations to St. Louis, and things like that. So I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions or at the end or follow up depending on what the format allows. But thanks for having us. We're really happy to be with you and also really grateful for your advocacy, because one of the things that I actually meant to mention is that we've been working with numerous disability advocates on transit stuff, because at the federal level, that's not sometimes considered by people to be obvious, but to us, it's like, you know, really troubling if these systems aren't set up from the beginning with everyone in mind.
Thanks, Saul. That's a really great introduction. And I think even in the open comments, you heard some of the concerns that we've heard in this committee about access to transit, and especially how that connects to pedestrian infrastructure. I think what Bobby brought up is something we've discussed frequently in the past and is an ongoing concern. I'm curious if there are any other questions or thoughts that would be important to share with the Congresswoman's staff while they're here about what we think would be valuable in this area.
So this is Bobby Brentley.
Hi, Bobby.
Yes, and young man's comment. I spoke with, I guess, the head of Metro, because I had a concern. I forgot what it was now. But I suggested they get people on a committee to work with a committee before they make a decision, because the people that use the transit should be the ones having input as to how it should be run. If the people don't know what the needs are, they can't make the proper decisions. That's why they need the people who use the transit system to have input.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think, you know, we couldn't agree more. And that just across the board, having consultation with folks who are actually using different systems for getting around is crucial to knowing what's needed, what tweaks there need to be. So I'm really glad to hear it. And next time I talk to them, which is I think going to be in about an hour, I'll bring that up as well and ask if there's room. Otherwise, I'll bring it up to them later this week. But hopefully, to just keep that conversation going and see if we can move towards a place where every, as many decisions as possible, or different steps and decisions have input from folks like you all who are actually using stuff. So thanks for bringing that up.
Hey,
Thank you.
This is Brian from Metro. So oddly enough, like right before I joined the meeting, I was working on a program, and it addresses some of the disability concerns and access to some of our bus stops. So the approach in the past for making the stops more accessible and providing amenities to them it's been very like case by case. There hasn't really been a structured framework around it, like where you could just go on a website and see how we do that. So that's actually being worked out right now by me. And one of the things we looked at was the amount of bus stops we have within the system, which is over 5,000, and came to discover that 2,000 of them were not compliant for wheelchair accessibility. So that's what we're working on with understanding how to disperse those funds, and also taking into account the other demographics that impacts minority population, socioeconomic status, and the surrounding land use to essentially come up with a prioritized list of how to approach fixing all of those issues and dispersing the funds to do it.
I think one thing that I want to mention is that we would love to have the staff, Saul or Danielle, come back and share more and seek feedback on some of the things that you're looking to change. And we've also extended that offer to Brian, although he's also a member of our committee, to come and share some of those ideas and look for feedback from this group on some of those upcoming changes at Metro. So I hope that's something we'll be able to do in the next few months. Any other thoughts or questions for Saul?
I guess I have a question and a combined question and comment. Has there been any progress or an update on the possibility of including operation support for transit in some of the federal funding? I know typically it's meant just for construction, like for helping hire bus operators, that kind of thing. And then if there's any work on some of these infrastructure bills to ensure that funding meant for public transit goes to those local agencies as opposed to going to MoDOT and then MoDOT using it for something else.
Kevin, those are wonderful questions and concerns that the Congresswoman shares. In the specific bus bill I mentioned that we're working on, we've had some pushback at the federal level because we've already included both of the things you just mentioned. They're like, well, local governments are responsible for their operations. We're like, we don't have money for that in St. Louis. Metro's working around the clock. The city's doing a lot of amazing work. So that would be included. And yes, I mean, both of those things. So the answer is yes, those are concerns that we've heard from folks in the community, and they've already been input into that legislation. There's also a big bill for operations relief for transit that a member of Congress from Georgia named Hank Johnson introduced, which is a really interesting bill. I'm happy to send it to you if you're interested, which the Congresswoman co-sponsored as soon as she saw it, because she was like, this is exactly the type of thing that we need so that our bus stops stop closing down, so we have enough to pay drivers. So thanks for the question, and couldn't agree more.
Okay. Well, Thank you to Saul for being here and to Danielle also for helping make this connection. I think as Saul said at the beginning, we imagine this is the beginning of a conversation. So we'll see Congresswoman Bush's staff back here again and hopefully get some more updates about these important conversations at the federal level. We're going to move on to our next agenda item. We are really excited to have Dr. Dan Isom here today. He is the Director of Public Safety, and we have discussed the issues of pedestrian, bicyclists, traffic safety in general in this group, and we wanted to invite Dr. Isom here to come and talk a little bit about the current approach to enforcement, what's been working, what some of those challenges are, and how we can best support the efforts that are happening across the city of St. Louis. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Isom, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for inviting me. Certainly it's a very important topic that we have been addressing since I've been here. So I have a little information about an initiative and some background on the structure of the police department as it relates to traffic enforcement. So since 2018, the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department has handled over 250 fatal crashes in the city of St. Louis, citywide. Of those, 65 have involved pedestrians. Additionally, preliminary investigations revealed that speed was a contributing circumstances in nearly 40% of those crashes. Of course, we can't prevent all crashes, but it's safe to say that if we are minimizing violations of traffic laws, we can reduce those numbers of fatalities that we have in the city of St. Louis, both people driving vehicles and pedestrians on the street. So in an effort to really increase our enforcement with the overall goal of reducing crashes and saving lives, we started a initiative in October of last year. Now, just a little bit of context on how the police department is structured. Typically, we had a traffic division. That traffic division over time has shrunk as the police department has reduced its numbers as well. So the traffic division was responsible for traffic throughout the city. Currently, there are only 10 officers who are assigned to our traffic division. When you look at 10 officers spread over 365 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours, that's not a lot of coverage. In addition to that, the tradition has been for the Missouri Highway Patrol to never do enforcement within the boundary of the city. They have done some over time at request, but they generally do not consistently do traffic enforcement within the boundaries of the city of St. Louis in our 4 major highways. So it's really been the job of our traffic enforcement officers and sometimes district officers when appropriate. The other thing is that our traffic officers were the only division that had the equipment in their vehicles to do speed enforcement. As a part of this new initiative, we purchased speed enforcement capability for 3 vehicles in each district. As a result of this, we now have the capability of doing speed enforcement citywide with our 6 different districts with that equipment and 3 cars in each district. So that's 18 cars that are available to do speed enforcement. A little bit more context is that traditionally we have focused on just both moving and non-moving violations. Pulling people over for, bad plates or, lack of inspection. We wanted to focus our resources on moving violations that generally have an impact on safety. And so that is also a focus that we have had in this initiative. So under this initiative, the district captains, we have 6 districts in the city of St. Louis. they do an analysis to determine what are the high accident locations within their districts. And if I could, I'm going to try to, if I know what I'm doing here, share my screen and give you a look at sort of the data we use to give a visual of, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
I can see it.
So this is the information that we use as the captains pick out 3 different locations, high traffic locations within their district. We have biweekly meetings where we map out where are the accidents that are happening within those locations. The purple, light and dark purple sort of areas are traffic accidents or calls for traffic accidents. The green, that's enforcement. That's where officers who have, written tickets. So as much as possible, we try to track both accidents and enforcement to see if we're making an impact. Of course, as we look at this data, we hope that some of these purple dots will go away over time. So each, if you can look at this, each district keeps track bi-weekly of the number of stops they made, the types of violations, the percentage of violations that are moving violations, and the number of calls we've received for traffic accidents over the 2-week period. As you look at sort of these numbers from the 3rd district to the 6th district to traffic safety, you can see that we get a significant amount of calls for traffic. It is something that takes up a lot of our officers' time responding to traffic accidents. This started in October of this year. And what we found is that we're starting to have success in reducing the numbers as we become more strategic about how we look at the data in terms of crashes, more strategic about putting our officers in the places where we have high accident locations, focused on moving violations, which is the most important thing, life safety, not non-hazardous moving violations. We have slowed down a little bit in the past couple of weeks due to COVID, because we have had, of course, some COVID positive increases, some quarantines within the police department, and we didn't want to add to the spread by having more contacts. But as we get past this, latest surge in Omicron, we will get back to our enforcement patterns. The final thing I will say is that I have told the police department to submit every 2 weeks to the public that type of activity. So that information that I gave you goes out every 2 weeks, so the public has an understanding of what we're trying to do. One of the things you could do is, if you read that information, or if you have information about locations you think are particularly challenging locations, or locations that might really be of danger. We're not just taking statistics, but I've told the captains that, of course, if we get community feedback about maybe locations that we're not aware of, then we need to address those as well. But we have seen not only good feedback from the community, but we've seen real feedback from the data as we've been doing this for now the past 2.5 months or so.
Dr. Isom, where should members of this committee direct those sorts of feedback points about locations that might be of particular concern?
Right. So the police department has, and I don't have that right now, social media, Twitter that you could send that information to, but you could always call your respective district and provide that information to the captain within that district.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for, okay, so we have one question, which is, where is the weekly data published? Is that on the police department's website?
Oh, this is Bobby Brantley.
Yes, Bobby.
Yes, I have a suggestion of at least having, well, I think it should be mandatory. There's a four-way stop system at all liquor stores. Those are dangerous intersections. All liquor stores need some type of four-way stop.
Thanks, Bobby, for that suggestion. Make sure we get a note on that. And I know Dr. Isom doesn't get to decide where the traffic stop signs go, unfortunately, although maybe he would like to. Okay, so our first question from Patrick is, where is the weekly data published from each district?
Yeah, I think they publish it on Twitter, but I'll get that information to you.
Great, and we'll follow up, Patrick, and make sure that the whole committee has access to that. And then Dana, do we have a question?
Yes, my question is, if you are encountering a safety issue and it's not near your home or work, you're not familiar what district you're in, how do you find out what district it is?
Yeah, if you go on the police department's website, they have each district and their location identified, and also they will, within each district, they tell which neighborhoods are within those districts. And so you could go on the website and you could find out. So if you're like in Greaterville neighborhood, it will tell you that you're either in probably the 5th or the 6th district. I think the 6th district is Greaterville.
Thank you.
And I just dropped a link in the chat to that as well. And you can click on the districts and it'll pull up a larger resource for that.
Dr. Isom, the next question we have in the chat is, has there been any further discussion about adopting a Vision Zero policy or a Vision Zero direction? And you may not know the answer to that now, and that's okay. We can always follow up.
And I'm not sure what that means. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So Jackie's actually included it, working towards zero roadway fatalities. And she's included the link. We'll send you the link after this meeting so you can take a look at it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's the goal. I mean, we would prefer not to have any. And that's why we're focused on high accident locations, right? Not just randomly doing enforcement throughout the city. Our goal is to reduce fatalities as much as possible. So if we have any chance of doing that, we have to be very judicial about how we and where we put our resources. So yeah, that is the goal, is to have no fatalities.
Sounds like a great goal from our end. And we'll share the information about the Vision Zero network vision with you as well, so you can have that. We have a couple of questions and comments about education, including signage about speed enforcement or educational billboards about rules of the road. So I guess maybe a sort of broader question, and are there any thoughts or efforts around education or ways that we could support in that educational direction?
Yeah, I think of course there is. I mean, I think the best way to do that is, getting into schools with young people and talking to them about driver safety and the impact of reckless driving and, on people's lives. But also there's a potential to do that through the city court, the municipal court, to have some partnership with them. And then just, sort of general informational signage is probably a good idea too. I always have the philosophy, there's not one thing that's going to change behavior. And certainly if strictly enforcement is not going to be sort of the panacea for, changing behavior completely. So it has to be a multifaceted approach. Not to say that enforcement is not important. I do think it is, and it has some impact, but all those other things help as well.
Dr. Isom, on that thought of multiple solutions and things like that, have there been any internal conversations with other departments, mainly city streets, Board of Public Service, other departments, about going at like a pronged approach of how you guys have the data of where these high crash areas are? Has there been any, and obviously there's the wards and how all that interacts, but conversations within departments about, hey, we'd really like to see infrastructure solutions on the streets where we're seeing more high crashes? Do you guys have conversations with all their people? I guess what's the interagency coordination?
Yeah, I mean, as you might imagine, there are a lot of conversations with the streets department who are try to work through traffic calming solutions throughout the city. So that's something happening. Looking at traffic light patterns, as the one participant talked about, having lights at liquor stores. So I think all of us are thinking about multiple ways. I will say, and maybe Grace has more information about this, I will say that the education piece is probably something that is very lacking. That is something that I haven't heard a lot about. We've talked about enforcement. We talked about traffic easing. We've even talked a little bit about, how we could provide a resource for young people who get tickets and don't have a license, and trying to get them sort of compliant. Through that compliance, you'd hope they have a better understanding of the law. But there hasn't been a lot of discussion about sort of an overall educational sort of campaign for people in the city.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dr. Isom. I'll just quickly chime in for anyone who doesn't know who I am. Sorry, I did not introduce myself in the chat, but my name is Grace Kyung. I work within the mayor's office, listening and taking notes as well. And I can follow up with Liz and you all on opportunities for the city to collaborate with the Community Mobility Committee on educational opportunities. And Sam, I think you were the one that just asked about interdepartmental efforts and coordination. And there are internal meetings that are occurring and us determining the best way to continue to have those conversations, recognizing that there have been systems in place and how we can continue to refine systems or build potentially new ones if that's needed as well. So we will keep you all updated on how that approach will look if it changes, and then if there's targeted approaches throughout the city as we also think about citywide strategies. Sorry, Patrick.
You actually answered the question that I was looking for so Grace would be the point person right now for education stuff?
I will be one of your key people to help with coordination, making sure we have the right city department and agencies at the table. I am happy to be the point person if anyone has a question in particular and doesn't know where it should be directed. But Liz, I will lean on you and who you would like the usual point person to be, because I'm new to the CMC.
Yeah, I think this is a new area for us, but I know we've talked about being able to be part of education in a meaningful way in the past. And I think that's definitely, and of course, Patrick, that's an area where you already have made a lot of headway. So I think we'd like to continue to figure out ways that we can expand that within our capacity. So let's follow up back on that. I want to be respectful of Dr. Isom's time. And just to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming and sharing this information with us. It's incredibly valuable. And I think there are a number of questions and comments that we haven't addressed in the chat. And so we'll follow up with a combination of you and Grace and probably Jamie to understand some of those answers and get them back to the committee. I would love if you are willing, or someone from your team is willing, to come back in a couple of months and give us an update on how things are working, and check in on the progress. That would be really great. We won't put you on the spot to commit to that now, but we'd love to see you here again in the future. I
will certainly come back. I always like to get people back who are actually doing the work, though. I'm just like publicizing it. So maybe if I come back, I'll have a captain or a major who are actually, identifying the locations, putting officers out there on the street. But I do think this is going to have an impact and reduce our fatalities that we have here in the city of St. Louis.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We'll let you off the hook. We'll come back around to our other questions. And we're going to move on to our last couple of agenda items.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to verbalize this agenda item, and then we will be following up via email with our voting members. So if you are one of the 11 voting members, you have been contacted by either me or Taylor, and you are aware of that. We voted in new voting members. However, we also need to vote in our chair and vice chair as voting members, which is me and Taylor, because per our bylaws, only voting members can serve as chair and vice chair. So if you are currently a voting member, you'll get an email from me probably later this afternoon that asks for a nomination and then a vote for Taylor and I, so that we can continue to serve as chair and vice chair. I will say, I guess I won't say this for Taylor. Taylor, would you like to say something about your position?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liz. I think I've stated this before in the past, but really take seriously the commitment of this committee to be representational and to kind of push that forward. And in that vein, I've been in this position for 2 years. If anyone else who is a voting member is interested in kind of taking that role, I'd be happy to coach them through that. And kind of pass the reins on to someone else also. So if you're interested, if you're a voting member and you're interested in taking on the vice chair role, you can also email us that, and I'd be happy to nominate somebody else for that, or continue on in this capacity, whatever the voting members see fit. So just wanted to elevate that as well.
Great, thank you, Taylor. And again, you can reach out to Taylor or reach out to me, and we'll both put our email addresses. Well, you all have my email address. No one needs mine. In the chat. Okay, our next agenda item is a quick update on subcommittees. So typically we ask the subcommittee chairs to give a little update. This time I am going to give the update because I want to talk a little bit about future subcommittees. So right now we have 3 active subcommittees, the Engagement Committee, the Traffic Calming Committee, and the Open Streets and Parklets Committee, which is one committee with 2 sets of goals. I'll put this link into the chat. Somehow I'll put this link into the chat when I'm done talking, so you can go back and read these in more depth. But all of these committees are excited and eager to have people involved and participating in them. We've outlined some of the short-term goals for these groups. I think one thing that's important to note is that the Engagement Committee is an ongoing standing committee that is going to consistently be recruiting and engaging our membership. So that is that's going to be happening for the rest of the time of the CMC. We're very lucky to have new co-chairs on that committee, Dawn and Charles. And then the Traffic Calming, Open Streets, and Parklets committees, the 2 of those committees, have some shorter term goals, and then they'll be transitioning to some other goals going forward. So Traffic Calming is currently creating a guide to serve as a resource for residents, stakeholders, and decision makers. The Open Streets portion of the Open Streets and Parklets Committee is supporting small scale open streets events, including Parking Day in September. And then they're also working on a manual about parklets to serve as a resource for interested groups, engaging with new stakeholders who are interested in parklets. So Kevin Hahn is the chair of the Traffic Calming Committee. Sam McCroy is the chair of Open Streets and Parklets. So I want to encourage folks to reach out to these groups, and we will send, again, their email addresses, and they can also drop them in the chat. So the other thing that I want to bring up about subcommittees is we've talked a little bit about what would help us make a new subcommittee. So we see subcommittees as being an opportunity for us to get into more depth about the topics that we are talking about here in the CMC, and particularly to help develop those tools and resources to advocate, to have conversations in a deeper way than what we're able to do here in the full group meeting. So this is a really exciting opportunity for us to say, what are the priorities and what can we really do here as a group that will help move and change mobility and transportation in the St. Louis region. So to have a new subcommittee, we want to make sure that we have someone who's in charge, who's kind of willing to lead that, and that could be a chair or a co-chair. We want to try and encourage groups to have a shorter term, like a 6-month goal that they could achieve. That could be research, it could be completing some sort of project, it could be coming up with a set of recommendations. There's a range of different topics. It could be working with a specific city department, but something that's short term that people can feel committed and excited about. And that there's a couple of people who want to be involved. So that could be anywhere from 1 to 10 people who want to participate in that. So there are a lot of different possible subcommittees we could have. And I think even in this conversation today, we probably had like 8 possible things that could come up. But that has included, what we've talked about in the past has included having place-based responses. So for example, today we talked a little bit about downtown. We know we've talked in the past about the ADA transition plan, and I think that is still a really important topic. So being able to focus on that. We just had this great conversation with Dr. Isom about enforcement and education. That might be an opportunity for us. Of course, bus and transit has come up multiple times. And then a focus on micromobility and our scooters and bikes or not bikes is something that I know is interesting to a lot of members of this group. So what we're looking for right now is to make sure that we have spaces that people are excited about, and also that there's folks who can take these things and move them forward. It's really important to note that you can be a member of a subcommittee without coming to these meetings. These subcommittees can be chaired by non-voting members. So anyone who's excited about taking on one of these topics, scoping a short-term goal, I would be happy to talk with you and help figure out how we can make the work we're doing actionable. So you can reach out to me, you can put it in the chat. Taylor, before I take this slide down, I want to open it up if you have anything to add to this.
Don't think so. Thanks.
Okay, great. So we just have about 4 minutes left, and I know I missed a bunch of comments in the chat. But if there are any other open business topics that people want to need to get out there that we need to announce to the group, either raise your hand or put it in the chat. But otherwise, that is what we have for today. Sam, are you trying to say something?
No, I am on my cell phone and reading the chat, so.
Okay. Well, as we know, open business is sometimes just Sam making announcements. So if Sam doesn't have any announcements and we don't see any others, we will go through the chat. We'll make sure we'll be following up with the folks. And again, we're really grateful for all of your participation in the CMC, and we'll see you soon. Is Cheryl still? Cheryl, yes, we are going to have the scooter reps come later in the spring. We wanted to make sure we followed up with Dr. Isom, but we are planning to have them come.
Liz, I plan to tackle these notes over the weekend, so you should have them by Monday or Tuesday.
Yay. Okay, we have a lot of follow-up. This
Yes.
is an unfortunate side effect of this situation.
I believe I got everyone. I believe. So
Okay. And can you download the chat? I can download the chat and email it to you.
I think only the host can download the chat or whoever like made the meeting. So if you download the chat, send it to me. I think I got everyone. I was doing a lot of copying and pasting. But double checking would be great.
Okay, great.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
I just got a copy of the chat saved.
I think it has a lot of me going, awesome, awesome. Okay.
That was great. I think the new format for the beginning worked really well. It seemed like a lot of people were able to vocalize some things they wanted to highlight. So
yeah, that seemed really positive. Oh, I should stop the recording.